So welcome back, everybody. I think in the sake of time, we better get going. I know we were, for other logistical reasons, running a little bit late in the morning. Can never trust the Swedish trains, can we? Yeah, so, and I believe some are still out eating. That's very important, at least for people who come from the southern region where I'm from. Food is essential, to us. So our first speaker here is Lisa Salberg. I must say, she has a very interesting story. And if we go back to, this session is about hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. And if you look at the guidelines, we believe the guidelines are very important. They are stressing the importance of family history. And Lisa, for sure, has an interesting family history in relation to this disease. Not just a family history. You have a very interesting story yourself. Yeah?
I do.
So, and not stopping there, you realize the importance of this. You started the HCMA, Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association, back in '96. This is a preeminent organization improving the lives of these patients with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, importantly preventing their untimely death and advancing the global understanding. Lisa.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I know we're after lunch, so we've got a little bit of, that lunch fatigue coming in. I needed to start this talk with saying it may be my first trip to Sweden, but my family comes from Sweden, and in fact, I have a cousin in the audience today. This is my grandfather, Per Christian, and I've learned that I've been mispronouncing my family name my entire life. It is not Sherwin, it is Hevin. Did I get that better? So I probably didn't get it right. That's his last trip to Sweden in 1973. So Grandpa, I made it back. Okay. This is the rest of my family tree. I'm denoted by the heart on the bottom. Everybody who is pink or red has been diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, including my daughter who's sitting in the front row with the blue hair. I went backwards. Let me do that for a second. Ironically, the first family member that we can trace this back to is Timothy Hart, H-A-R-T, which is down the Irish side of my family tree. Thank you, Neil, for that Irish genetics. But HCM devastated our family in 1995 with the death of my sister at the age of 36, which led me to want to stop other families from going through the same tragedy that we went through, and that began the work of the Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association. Not many speakers start with their family pedigree, but to me it helps you understand why I'm in front of you today and how we began this adventure. So, the topic here is finding a diagnosis or trying to get to one. So in the Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association, we do a lot of surveying of our population. I work with patients one-on-one when they are diagnosed, and they're looking for advocacy services. So we ask them, what were you told was the cause of your symptoms before they told you you had hypertrophic cardiomyopathy? And we found that 19% were told that they had some form of asthma. Almost 14% were told mitral valve prolapse. So we got to the heart, but we didn't get to the conclusion. Anxiety and panic attacks were present in roughly 17%. Depression, 18%, and innocent murmurs, 51%. They weren't so innocent, were they? They were actually hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So is it all of these other things, or is it really HCM? And when you take this population and you break it down to how many, we're told that they had an innocent murmur and asthma, an innocent murmur and an anxiety disorder. You start to raise your awareness even more so in the clinical setting that maybe we should be thinking about HCM a little bit more frequently. So what is our challenge? And I added this slide kind of at the last minute after learning a little bit about how the Swedish system handles imaging. It's a little different than the United States. So the challenge to diagnosis is getting to imaging, getting to an echocardiogram, which then could potentially lead to a cardiac MRI. But we have to get to that echo. We have to have good findings. We have to have the right measurements. And then we can take action. Then we know we have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy present. And then we can start thinking about how to treat that hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So what is hypertrophic cardiomyopathy and what isn't it? So if we're working on the concept of building out the diagnosis, first we have to understand what it is the disease actually is and what the phenocopies or mimickers are. So we know that about 13 genes account for more than 3,000 mutations. This number may be a little bit out of date, it might be a little higher than that we can identify sarcomeric mutations in HCM. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. We know that if we genetically test those within HCM clinics in the United States, about 40% come up with a positive gene, which means 60% don't. Or actually, it's probably more like 55% don't. And about 5% come into this non-sarcomeric mutation pathway. That slide didn't get updated. There's another one that should be on there. So the non-sarcomeres could be A and B kinase, it could be LAMP2, it could be Fabry's disease, it can be amyloidosis, it can be sarcoidosis, it can be a lot of other things that cause the heart to be thick. So are all thick hearts hypertrophic cardiomyopathy? No. They have their own diagnosis. And why it's critically important to know the difference is because there's different treatments for these different disorders. And if we can get people to the right treatment at the right time, then we make the difference. So here we have normal hearts on the side, cartoon pictures, obviously. And we have different presentations of hypertrophy. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is met with the challenge of having been named 75 times or more. Every time somebody finds a different place of hypertrophy, they give it a new name. Tyr's disease, Brock's disease, idiopathic hypertrophic subaortic stenosis, ASH. We have so many names, but it's all the same disease. So how can you make sure that your imaging is capturing the actual disease state? Apical HCM was thought to be rare just a few years ago, and almost completely in the Japanese population. Well, if you look at the timeline, some of the echo technology was created in Japan and they had better echoes earlier, and they were able to visualize the apex better. So was it the Japanese, or was it just a misdiagnosis or underdiagnosis of apical HCM? We added different images because patients didn't see themselves on a poster. And when they don't see themselves on a poster, they think they're rare. All of these presentations are completely normal in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Hypertrophy does not need to be in the septum. It can be in the apex, it can be the free wall, it can be mid-cavity where you have an obstructed point there, it can be obstructed at the top of the outflow, it can be obstructed in any different ways. And the apicals have a particular risk factor of developing apical aneurysms. So critically important that patients understand their anatomy, physicians understand the anatomy, and that they make decisions for their treatment accordingly. Why is it important to understand anatomy? Because the treatment pathway for HCM is so diverse. And if you hear my talk a little bit later, you're going to see this slide again because it's so important. There's not a pathway of treatment for HCM. There are multiple pathways, and patients could be in 1, 2, or 3 of these pathways simultaneously. You can be at high risk of cardiac arrest and having atrial fibrillation and being obstructed. You can be all of them. You can only be obstructed, have minor symptoms. You could be non-obstructed with minor symptoms or requiring heart transplantation. So understanding what path you're on is critical. The top path is very important as well. You could be asymptomatic. You could be gene positive and just need follow-up to make sure that you're not turning into one of these other pathways, because you can be asymptomatic and at high risk of sudden cardiac arrest. So there are a lot of pitfalls here for patients and clinicians to fall into, but if you understand the path of the disease, you can take appropriate action. And this is where advocacy steps in to help patients understand, to help medical professionals understand us better, and to bring this information forthright so we can have good conversations. If you read the current guidelines, we have shared decision-making as part of that guideline. So how do you share in that decision-making if you don't understand the disease process? So in the United States, we're on a mission to find the undiagnosed. And anybody, any municipality, any government agency can take this same concept and put it to work for them. So we've created something called the Healthy Cardiac Monitoring Act, HCMA, if you see what I did there. So what we're doing is we want to include family heart health history questions in the well-child examination, when your kids go in for vaccines, when they go in for growth checks, we want to ask about family heart health history. If there's a history of sudden death, heart failure, defibrillators, pacemakers, atrial fibrillation, the clinician should know, and they should be triggered to screen these families for HCM or any of the other disorders that can be genetic, ARVC, DCM, long QT syndrome, Marfan syndrome, anything that can cause a cardiac abnormality. We want them to be found. So while we named the Act, HCM Act, it is all-inclusive. We want to improve professional development of healthcare workers so that they can identify us and know when to refer us to additional treatments and additional testing, I should say. And we want to improve the student-athlete screening so that it is more consistent municipality to municipality. In the United States, each state can set up their own regulations. So we want to make sure that they're standardized. We want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to act. If you don't know it's there, you can't do anything to stop the negative consequences of HCM. So we want to make sure that everybody knows. And I don't know if you can get it or not, but if you want more information, just take a picture of the QR code at any time during my talks. I've got a few of them in here that'll lead you to more information on the topic. So the other thing that we're doing is we've created the HCM Academy. So HCM Academy, these are our faculty right now. It's myself, Marty Marin, Anjali Owens, and John Lynn Jeffries, who are all US-based experts in HCM. And we've created an online learning module for health professionals. I have cards out here at our table where you can take the QR code from there, and anybody can take these courses. Lay people can take them, anybody can take them. We also have partnered educational opportunities with the American College of Cardiology and the American Heart Association. And there's also some amazing patient stories that are incredibly inspiring and maybe a little tearjerker at some point as well. So I would encourage anybody who wants to learn more about HCM to not only take the courses themselves, but to share it with their healthcare providers, other healthcare professionals. We're hoping that we can speak to some members of your Swedish organizations and have them start to facilitate this educational opportunity throughout the country. One of the things that we did in the United States, which it's a little different system than here, but you can take this information and hopefully your regulators will look at it as well. We held what is referred to as an externally led patient-focused drug development meeting. You can watch the entire thing on our YouTube channel. You can read our Voice of the Patient report. And these elements helped regulators in the United States understand not only what hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is, but the burden of disease to patients and what we, the patients, were seeking from the regulators and from industry in terms of treatment options. And this meeting and other initiatives helped get us a drug to market with a very unique label that is allowing for what they call a REMS program in the United States, which is a risk evaluation mitigation system, so that we can get a drug to market a little bit faster and be safe. And that safety includes doing more echocardiograms and follow-up so that we can make sure that the patients are safe, because patient safety is, as Penella knows, number one. And this process helped us educate the regulators as to what we were willing to accept at risk and how we were partners in this process. So if you want to take a look, I also encourage you to watch the halftime break at this session, where you could hear directly from the very first patient ever diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy in the United States, Mr. Claude Brady. And unfortunately, we lost Claude in January of 2022, but he was diagnosed in 1959 with HCM and lived all the way till 2022. So he's a very inspiring story, very folksy, definitely US Western kind of guy, but you can learn his story there. So one of the things we do at the HCMA to help in that diagnostic process is help develop networks of support for individuals with HCM so that they don't feel so alone. Getting to diagnosis is step one. Figuring out what treatment pathway you're on can take a long time, and sometimes peer-to-peer support can be really helpful. So we have live discussion groups several times a week. In fact, one of our moderators is here today. We have our HCMA Recognized Center of Excellence programming, many of which have mental health support services as well as on-ground support groups. coming back just now after COVID. We have a very large social media outreach, which I'll talk about on the next slide. And we have an office staff that's ready and willing to take phone calls from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time from all over the world. If you're out of the United States, we do Zoom calls. We also have transportation funds for U.S. residents who need help getting to care. So creating the support mechanism, the diagnosis is step one, supporting them through life with HCM. This isn't a beginning, middle, and an end. It's a journey throughout their entire lifespan, and things change over time. So we want to make sure patients are supported. So one of the ways we do that is through social media. This is a very busy slide, but the top corner there is our HCMA Facebook group, or Facebook page. That's got about 14,000 followers right now, and then we have subgroups that are private groups, so the communications don't show up on your social media feed. They're hidden behind a wall. But what we did a couple months ago, or a couple years ago now, is we found some Swedish residents who were interested in becoming activists themselves in HCM. And I said, okay, let's give you your own page where you can speak in Swedish, because I don't understand Swedish. And we did the same with our Dutch colleagues. And we partnered these Facebook groups to give them a little bit more appearance and give them a better platform. That group started a little over a year ago, I guess now. Am I right about that? And I said, it's going to be a slow roll in the beginning. And as of today, the big group has about 9,000 participants. And the Swedish group is quickly approaching 300, which I think is an amazing accomplishment in a short period of time. So to provide support for patients so that they can get to that diagnosis and know what to do with it is critically important. And peer-to-peer support in every country, in every language is critically important. So what is, or one of our other objectives is to create care models that are based on evidence-based medicine where patients can trust the treatment that they're getting. And we call those HCMA Recognized Centers of Excellence. The concept was loosely established in the late 90s. I met some guy from the Cleveland Clinic named Dr. Harry Lever and Barry Marin and a few others. But at that time, the Cleveland Clinic was doing 20 myectomies a year. Today, they do about 225 myectomies a year. And Harry Lever has a slide that he calls the Lisa factor. I like to call it the HCMA factor, where you can see when we started to coordinate with a center who did high volume, high quality care, that patients found them. And then I made Bruce Lytle so tired he retired. And then Nick Moderator took over. And then somebody came and joined them for a little while, but then ran back to Sweden. So that's one of our centers. Our original goal was to have a center within a 5-hour drive of most Americans. We've almost accomplished that, except for the Midwest. And the model was based after best clinical practices of the large programs, Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, the former Tufts program. And eventually, the professional societies agreed with us. And in 2020, when the guidelines were published, they acknowledged the care model best for HCM patients was what they referred to as a comprehensive or primary HCM program, which was the exact model of the HCMA Recognized Center of Excellence program. So I guess it's working quite well for everybody. And then again, the Lori Fund provides travel grants to people who can't physically get there. So this is what our map of the United States looks like today. The red dots are current programs. The hearts are the largest programs. There's an anchored program. So Mayo Clinic has anchored programs in 2 states. And we have a number of programs currently under evaluation. We'll be bringing our first international program on shortly. That's Toronto. And I've worked very closely with the teams in Italy as well. I'm hoping that we can come up with a similar concept working within the Swedish system for this country and others as we move out. So next time I come to speak to you, hopefully I'll have a world map with a lot of dots on it. So I wanted to talk about a special challenge for some members of our population. Women tend to be diagnosed much later than men, by about a decade, but women are more severely affected by midlife than men. So why is this happening? Well, we're women and we're tough and we can handle it, and our families are more important than we are, which is a complete fallacy. We're as important. So women need to speak up, and they need to be seen, and they need to get diagnosed earlier because it is critically important to their long-term outcomes. The other thing that we do at the HCMA is we promote research. And how do you get to better diagnostics? How do you find the HCM? You work on that research arm as well, and you help to uncover some of the pitfalls that the medical community may not have found already on their own, but we as the patients can see clearly. And when we start communicating together, we find these pathways to better diagnosis. So we're beginning our HCMA patient registry. I've been collecting information for 27 years on HCM patients. It was not a formalized registry, and we are now putting that into a system where we'll have IRB approval on it, and we'll be able to publish off of that. Additionally, we've assisted in clinical trial recruitment for about 6 different clinical trials as of right now. We were the largest recruiter into the Live HCM study, which evaluated exercise in HCM, what is safe, what is not. We've been faculty at FDA clinical trial training programs to teach clinical trialists how to use patient advocacy to help recruit and promote the idea of clinical trials. And we've published a number of findings. At this point, I think we have about 27 publications. So I can't wait to see what we're able to publish out of Sweden in a couple of years, so that'll be great. None of this happens in a silo. This is all a partnership, and some of my great partners are here today in the audience. And we have US-based partners, we have industry partners, we have the Global Heart Hub, and we now have the HCM Society. So that's the professional organization for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy that was just founded this past year, and I am a proud board member there. So nothing happens when one person tries to lift. But if we all put our hands in, the lift becomes a lot easier. And when you have great partners like these, amazing things can happen. So I wanted to call out to the Cardiomyopathy Patient Council of the Global Heart Hub. We have a lot of people in here, and I'm hoping that we're going to add a couple of logos soon, some new organizations. But partnership is critical, and they're members of the Global Heart Hub who can get you some information in the back during today's event. So how do we build the future of HCM advocacy worldwide? Well, we had a little idea that we would just throw a little I after that and call us HCMA International. And about 3 years ago, a patient from Sweden who was frustrated and not feeling very well said, I want to do something here. I said, okay, first we put your oxygen mask on, take care of you, and then we take care of the rest of the country. And she brought in some colleagues, and we found a community. And I am very proud to pronounce that we have our first baby. We have HCM Swedish Society, and they have materials out at the table today. And hopefully they will become a member of the Global Heart Hub. And we have amazing, if they want to just raise their hands, Lotus and Marianne, the founding members, are right here. So I just want to congratulate them and give them a round of applause. They have some colleagues with them here, and I'm sure they'll be introducing them later, but I just wanted to give a shout out because I'm really proud of them. So if you might be interested in joining us in our endeavor to make HCM care better worldwide, we have a meeting that we're going to hold right now. I think we have the 17th held, but we haven't figured out the exact day yet. Take a picture of that. Gwen Mays, if you want to raise your hand right here, she's in the audience. She can discuss with you our initiatives as well. But we would like to help other countries develop programs like we've helped here in Sweden. So 1 down, 159 countries to go. And it doesn't happen in a silo. This is my team in the office, this is my board, and as of last year, we had over 100 dedicated volunteers helping us in our mission. So it takes a village, and I'm very happy to see you all here in the audience as part of our village. And I want to thank everybody here today, our staff, our coordinators, our contractors, our donors, but most of all, the one thing I did not tell you about myself is I'm a heart transplant recipient. I no longer have HCM, and Brandy was my heart donor's name, so if it wasn't for Brandy, I wouldn't be here today. So thank you.
Sounds like you have Swedish descent.
I do. My grandfather is Swedish. Yeah.
So I guessed right. I was thinking it was a Swedish person when I just read the name. You know.
But my last name is very confusing because I'm married to a man who is Russian Jew, and at Ellis Island they changed his name from Zerenbach to Salberg, and my grandparents were Sherwin, but born of Johansson. So I'm very confused.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's very interesting. Now, I worked for some years at Cleveland Clinic, as you mentioned, and exactly with this. And it's very interesting. I mean, you're a very important person, not just for Cleveland Clinic, but for the patients. I mean, this is very. So when they are diagnosed, and I meet patients all the time with this, and they're diagnosed and they're scared and they start to check up and they check Dr. Google, and they very soon found Lisa. Yeah. So and then they are chatting and calling, and you're more or less controlling the flow of the HOCM patients. To say, no, you should go to Mayo Clinic, you should go to Cleveland, that would suit you best. And you're really asking them a lot of questions, how thick is the septum, how's the mitral? And so for all my patients, for all the other patients, thank you so much. I mean, that's fantastic.
We're happy to be able to do the work.
Yeah, we I'm thinking, I mean, you know so much about it. I mean, we're moving forward all the time, but what are the important steps going forward from your point of view and for your organization?
For Sweden or for?
No, yeah, for the patient in general, I would say, and for the diagnosis and for, I mean.
Better general awareness that heart muscle diseases are real. They affect a lot of people. 1 in 250 people have diagnosable hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, either by echo, MRI, or genetics. And if we peel back the layers and demystify it a little bit and show the faces of those with HCM in every nation, at every age level, I think we can open everybody's eyes to see that we don't look like heart failure patients in the way that most people thought of them, that we're not debilitated sitting in a chair. We can be active members of society. There's a couple of notable individuals that have led very active lives and have made changes to society in major ways. The former CEO of CNN has hypertrophic cardiomyopathy and had a myectomy at one of our centers. And I would call being the head of CNN a very intense job. We can handle intense jobs. We can do amazing things. We're brilliant physicians. We're patients. We're business leaders. We're nurse practitioners. We're everywhere. And we need to be seen and we need to be treated.
Exactly. So we're currently, this is more local. We're in Sweden now, as we know. And the way it works here is in terms of myectomy, that there are like 9-10 centers for heart surgery, and all doing a myectomy might, on the paper, look fun and nice for the surgeon. You want to be able to do it, but there are not so. The diagnosis varies a lot also, and in the most of the centers, it's only been done once or twice a year. So apart from one center where we do it way more, because we get patients from all over. But do you think it's wise? It's a kind of an open question.
I don't think that's wise at all.
So how? I mean, so practically in US there are 2 major players. There's
4 major surgical centers, and then there's probably 7 or 8 that are like the level below that. Yeah. So 40 to 60 surgeries per year are probably in about 7 centers, and 80 or higher in 4.
Yeah.
So even with that big geography, it's small. Yeah. People fly for surgery, and they're okay to do that. I was happy about 2 years ago to write a letter to the Swedish Health Society, I'm going to get the name wrong, to encourage them to develop a center of excellence type model that would work for the country. And I understand that's under evaluation right now. And hopefully we'll identify 2 or 3 centers within Sweden where high volume surgery can be done. For those who don't know the work that you do in a myectomy, it's almost a blind surgery for parts of it, because you're looking down through the aortic valve, and it's like doing surgery through a garden hose. And you need a little skill and ability and artwork to get that done properly. And if you don't do it right, you did something for nothing, because you don't take enough muscle out. So it's critically important that they have good surgery if it's going to be available. Now, we have other therapies coming down the line, but I don't think anybody's going to put you out of work, because there's so many various anatomies in HCM. Surgery is critically important. Alcohol ablation is important. And now new therapeutics to deal with obstruction are going to be important as well, but they have to be dosed carefully. Imaging is critical. You're going to need really great imaging for the follow-up of that drug, because if it drops the ejection fraction too far, we don't do any good. Yeah. So we have to have systems in place in every country to keep patients safe and give them options that are really the best level of care that we can provide, not what happens to be available.
So I mean, the whole kind of education that you are doing is so essential, and I can just tell from own experience down in Lund. So we have we cover the southern part of Sweden primarily, a part for getting patients from all over Sweden, but that's more unofficially. But so I've been out together with a hocomologist. So we've been on road trips to certain smaller hospitals. But we haven't been everywhere because, you know, we're drowning in work. So but I've been to a couple of those in southern Sweden. And interestingly, the cardiologists there are then sending us. So we have really many patients from Trelleborg and Karlskrona. You know that those are not big cities in Sweden. And I refuse to think that there are just families right there. So it's more a matter of information. If we could take this further, and especially with what you're doing and educating, there are so many more patients that shouldn't be misdiagnosed or aren't treated. So.
We were talking at lunch about true prevalence of disease and how many people were currently being treated in Sweden. And the number looks like 1 in 1,500 are currently in some type of care or diagnosed, but that number's a little loose right now. And that means there's about 6,500 individuals getting care in Sweden, when the ultimate number, which we'll never get to perfection, should be 40,000. Yeah. Even if we got halfway there, it'd be 20,000. So we've got a long way to go. There's no lack of work. These ladies and gentlemen are going to be a little tired in a little while when we start really loading on the work. But it's important work to help families get identified early. You know, if we can avoid sudden death, and if we can avoid early disability or death due to heart failure, you save one person in a family, you save the family. Yeah. I've lost my sister, my uncle, my dad, my grandfather, my great aunt, all too young. If not for transplant technology, I would not be here today. So they would have lost me as well. Well, that's just not going to happen because I'm too stubborn to die. But we need to make sure that families can stay together. We need to talk about family heart health history. We need clinicians to see us. We're here, and we want to be treated, and we want to have an opportunity to live a healthy, happy life. And together, I think we can do it.
I must say, every patient counts. Sometimes it is discussed now, it's only 1 or 2. But for that single patient who's dying, I mean, the experience for that patient and the family is 100%. So I think that's very important.
Absolutely.
Are there any questions from the floor?
We answered everything. We're good.
You covered it very nicely. Thank you so much for a great talk. And
thank you very much.
I think we made up for the problem from the morning.
We caught up?
Yeah.
Okay. We did our job. I think so. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.